It was a time when the laws of the universe were being rewritten, and the unseen borders between the heavens and the earth were suddenly fortified. For thousands of years, the jinn had possessed a secret and ancient ability. They could ascend to the highest reaches of the atmosphere, hovering at the very edges of the celestial realm to eavesdrop on the conversations of the angels. From these heights, they would catch fragments of divine decrees, whispers of upcoming events, and pieces of news regarding the future. They would then carry these stolen secrets back down to the earth, selling them to sorcerers, magicians, and fortune-tellers who used these half-truths to deceive the masses. This trade of shadows was their routine, their primary source of power, and their greatest pride. But in an instant, everything changed. One night, as a group of jinn attempted to take their usual positions in the sky, they were met with a terrifying and unprecedented sight. Instead of the quiet, welcoming void of the stars, the heavens seemed to actively attack them. Violent, piercing flames, the white-hot shooting stars known as Shihab el-Fakib, rained down upon them from every direction. The paths they had traveled for millennia were suddenly blocked by celestial guards of immense power. Terrified and confused, they fled back toward the earth. When they reached their tribes, they found the entire community in an uproar. Their leaders and elders asked why they had returned empty-handed and shaken. The scouts replied that a barrier had been placed between them and the news of the heavens. They reported that the sky was now filled with powerful guards and flaming projectiles that sought them out with precision. In the heavy silence that followed this report, a wise elder among the jinn realized the gravity of the situation. He told his people that such a massive and sudden shift in the celestial laws could only mean one thing: something monumental had happened on the earth. He reasoned that either a great punishment was coming or a great mercy had been sent. He commanded them to spread out to every corner of the globe, from the east to the west and the north to the south, to find the cause of this spiritual lockdown. One of these groups traveled toward the rugged deserts of Arabia. During the final hours of the night, they passed through a place called Wadi Nakhla, a valley located between Makkah and Ta'if. The valley was silent and desolate, but suddenly a voice began to resonate through the air. It was a voice unlike any they had ever heard, melodic, authoritative, and deeply moving. They followed the sound and discovered a man standing in prayer, leading a small group of followers. It was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, reciting the Quran during the dawn prayer. As the jinn stood and listened, every verse felt like a key unlocking the mysteries of their own existence. They heard the words of Surah Al-Fatiha and the guidance of the Creator. Their hearts, once filled with arrogance and rebellion, began to melt under the weight of the revelation. They realized at that moment that this divine speech was the very reason the heavens were now guarded. This message was so precious and its delivery so critical that the universe itself had been shielded to ensure its pure arrival to humanity. Without wasting a moment, the jinn rushed back to their tribe. They did not return as spies or thieves of secrets, but as transformed believers. They cried out to their people that they had heard a recitation so wonderful that it could only be from the Lord of the worlds. They announced that it gives guidance to the right way, and that they had believed in it wholeheartedly and would never again associate any partners with their Lord. This transformation was so significant that Allah revealed an entire chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Jinn, to describe this event and preserve their words forever. It marked a turning point in history where the jinn realized that their true status was not as masters of humans, but as fellow servants of the Almighty. For many years before this, humans had been deeply afraid of the jinn. Whenever a traveler entered a lonely valley at night, they would seek refuge in the master of the valley, believing the jinn could protect them. This practice only made the jinn more arrogant and predatory, thinking that humans were their subordinates. However, the light of the Quran corrected this balance. The believing jinn realized that humans were a noble creation and that the Prophet was sent for both races. The interaction between the Prophet and the unseen world continued to develop. Later, the Prophet was specifically commanded to teach the jinn in a more formal setting. One night after the evening prayer, he stood before his companions and asked who would be willing to accompany him to a meeting with the jinn. Most were too afraid to move, but Abdullah bin Masud, a devoted companion, stepped forward. They walked to a rocky, desolate area on the outskirts of Mecca. There the Prophet drew a circle in the sand with his staff and gave a stern warning. Ibn Masud was never to cross that line, no matter what he saw. If he crossed it, he would be lost forever. As Ibn Masud sat within the safety of that circle, the night grew intensely dark. Suddenly, he watched in awe as shadowy figures, tall and mysterious, descended upon the Prophet. They looked like dark clouds or heavy veils moving through the air. He heard a noise like a great storm or the beating of many wings. The Prophet stood his ground with unwavering courage, his voice rising above the chaotic sounds as he recited the Quran to the massive assembly of jinn. They gathered around him, sitting in rows, listening to the laws of Islam and the oneness of God until the break of dawn. During that night of intense spiritual activity, Ibn Masud also witnessed a vision of angels. These beings of light appeared in white garments and spoke in parables about the mission of the Prophet. They described a king who had built a magnificent palace and prepared a feast for all who would come. The king sent a messenger to call the people to the palace. Those who followed the messenger would eat and be satisfied, while those who ignored him would remain outside in the cold. The Prophet later explained to Ibn Masud that the king is Allah, the palace is paradise, the feast is the eternal reward, and he himself was the caller. On another famous occasion, the Prophet disappeared entirely from the company of his followers. The companions searched the valleys and mountain passes of Mecca in a state of sheer panic, fearing he had been kidnapped by enemies or carried away by malevolent spirits. It was one of the most agonizing nights the early Muslim community ever faced. When the sun finally began to rise, they saw the Prophet appearing from the direction of Cave Hira. They ran to him with tears of relief, and he explained that a messenger from the jinn had come to him with an invitation. He had gone with the messenger to their camp to recite the Quran to their various tribes and answer their questions about the faith. To reassure the companions and provide proof of this miraculous event, the Prophet took them to the site where the meeting had occurred. He pointed out the physical evidence left behind in the dust. There were large, unusual footprints in the dust that did not belong to any human, and the remnants of fires that looked different from any wood-burning flame the companions had ever seen. The companions stood in silence, realizing that the mission of their leader extended far beyond the visible horizon. This story, preserved through the centuries, serves as a profound reminder that the message of the Quran is universal and multidimensional. It was not sent only for those with bodies of clay, but for all conscious beings in the universe. It established that Prophet Muhammad was the Rasul uth Thaqalain, the messenger to the two heavy weights of creation, humans and jinn. The story of Surah Al-Jinn teaches us that truth has a frequency that resonates even in the hearts of those we cannot see. It reminds us that no matter how mysterious or frightening the world may seem, the word of the Creator is the ultimate guide, the ultimate protector, and the ultimate bridge between all worlds. Through these encounters, the jinn learned that they no longer needed to steal secrets from the angels to find purpose. They had been given a direct line to the truth through the final revelation. They became teachers among their own kind, spreading the message of monotheism and justice. Today, when a believer recites the Quran, it is said that they are never truly alone, for there are often listeners from the unseen world who still find peace in those same eternal verses that first stopped a group of traveling jinn in a lonely valley many centuries ago.